This is Chapter 7 for Introduction to Criminal Justice, CRJ 101. And in Chapter 7, we're going to watch a lot of videos, and these videos have to do with mostly use of force and what the police deal with in terms of using force. And then we are going to evaluate by watching videos whether or not the police used proper force. So I think it's one of the more interesting chapters that we have this semester. I think you're going to learn a lot and perhaps see things differently by the end of this video. There are some issues in policing that come up quite often. One is stress, discretion, corruption, and use of force. And we will deal with each of these individually, some in more detail than others. First one we'll look at is stress. Just by nature, police work is very stressful. And there's different kinds of stress that come along with police work. And what I found in my career was more of acute stress. And even then, I did not have much of it. Acute stress is stress that happens because of an incident and during the incident. It's something that pops up, you're responding to a call, and you feel the stress as you're responding to that call. But acute stress does not last long. It only lasts for the duration of that incident. But also with police work is what we call long-term stress. And these are factors that have long-term effect on somebody's well-being. And I was fortunate enough never to really have any long-term stress because of the police work. But I can see where some people would, where just the pressures of being a police officer and the constant stresses that are on a police officer could develop into long-term stress, which could develop into long-term issues. Much of the stress from police work is from within. And the acute stress that police officers will experience is usually from without or outside of the building, not within the building. The stresses from within is all the bull crap that goes on in police work, which is probably no different than any other line of work. And that's the cliquey groups. It's the people who will do whatever they need to do to get ahead. It's things like that the internal stress, the politics, that can really weigh on somebody. And if you're not prepared and mature enough to cope with the stresses, especially the stresses from within the police department, then it's probably not the career for you. There's definitely stress on relationships. Police officers have a very high rate of divorces, unfortunately. And because of the stress and what police officers experience, that does take a toll on relationships and marriages. And the best way to avoid those kinds of stress is to have an open relationship with your significant other, to talk about things, someone who you can, instead of holding it within and keeping your stresses to yourself, the best way is to talk about it with your significant other. That's why they're there. They're there to support you. And the work hours are also can be stressful. Especially when you first get on, chances are you're going to be working a lot of hours that you did not intend to work, but because you're a junior person, that you get held over or you get called in on your day off, you'll be working probably a shift that is not the best shift to work, and that'd be the midnight shift. So the work hours themselves can cause a lot of stress, and the work hours can cause stress on relationships. You're probably going to miss a lot of holidays your first few years on a police department. That's just how it is. Low person, the newest people are the ones that are stuck working holidays and working the hours that nobody else does. So all of these factors can lead to a lot of stress on police work. So you really need to be very strong, not physically strong, but mentally strong if you're going to be a police officer for the long run and have a successful career and successful relationships in addition to your successful career. Another issue that comes up with police work is police discretion. So what is discretion? It's being able to use your individual judgment instead of formal rules in decision making. So police departments have, as we have learned, have very strict rules and regulations. It's a paramilitary organization. However, it changes in terms of when you are out there doing your job. For the most part, when police officers are out on the street doing their job, they have a lot of discretion. And that's usually allowed under most police rules and regulations and policies, that they do allow for police to have discretion. And by discretion, who they decide to, what cars they decide to pull over, who they decide to stop and detain, who they decide to arrest. There's a lot of discretion. When they do pull cars over, discretion whether or not to issue a ticket. Now, there are some times in police work where officers will not have discretions. For example, when I first became a police officer in Newport, there was a big problem in Newport with loud parties. It was getting out of control. And the chief of police received instructions from the mayor of the city that every loud party that the police respond to, if there's a violation, the police are to issue citations for the violation. And so the chief informed everybody in the department that you shall have no discretion when it comes to loud parties. If there is a loud party that is in violation of the law, in violation of the noise ordinance, you shall issue them a summons. So we did not have discretion when it came to loud parties. If we went to a loud party and there was a violation, we had to issue citations. And it worked in one regard because word got out very quickly. And the loud parties were reduced because of the strict enforcement. However, it put officers in a very uncomfortable position because there are times when you would go to a loud party and they may be over, but maybe it's the first time that you're there. And maybe there's only a few people there. Maybe it's only 2 p.m. on a Saturday. Is that really the type of enforcement that's going to be effective in reducing loud parties? Is that what really the noise ordinance was designed to prevent? And quite often people would get mad, shoot the messenger. They would get mad at the officer because they'd be issued a citation, and we would try to explain to them, we have no choice in the matter. We don't have discretion. We must issue the citation. So there are times when police are not going to have discretion. Maybe there's a street that has experienced a lot of accidents, And there's a lot of complaints from residents on the street about people speeding down the street. Sometimes you will get assigned to that street and given the instructions that anybody in violation of the law on that street is to be issued a citation. And so there are certain times when police are not going to have discretion. But in general, police do have a lot of discretion. And the opposite of discretion is what we call full enforcement. And that's you arrest every violator and you issue tickets to every violator. So that's full enforcement. So do we really want to take away discretion from police? And there's a movement out there that they do want to take away discretion from police. Therefore, if you take away discretion from police and we go to full enforcement, that means every single person that the police pull over is going to get issued a ticket. Every time there's probable cause, no matter the circumstances, somebody is going to get arrested. And in my opinion, that is not really an effective way for police to operate. We want to give them discretion. We want to give them the ability to weigh the circumstances and decide what the best course of action is. We allow police to carry guns and we give them the authority to use lethal force. So why would we not entrust in them discretion to make the right decision? But we need to also recognize that there are problems with discretion because discretion can be misused and abused. So there is misuse and abuse when it comes to discretion. And that's unfortunate, but it is the minority. It definitely is the minority. If there is an officer who has particular bias or racial issues, certainly given that officer discretion on who they want to stop, who they want to issue tickets to, who they're going to search, that could be a real problem. So it just has to be monitored. Police discretion should be allowed, but it needs to be monitored. And that's the job of a supervisor, to ensure that those officers that have discretion, that they're using it properly. They're not pulling people over because of a racial issue or because of bias. And that they are enforcing the law equally and equitably. When it comes to an officer making a decision on whether or not to arrest or to issue a citation, there's several factors that a police officer must consider, must weigh in their mind. What's the best course of action? Is it arrest or is it not arrest? How do I want to use my discretion? And one of the bigger things is the nature of the crime. Certainly if it's a armed robbery, then that alone is going to mean the person is going to get arrested. There's not going to be any discretion there. The officer's not going to say, oh, well, don't do it next time. So the nature of the crime, how serious was the crime? Was it not that serious that maybe the officer can give them a warning? Department policies play a role because policies will guide officers on when they can use discretion and when they cannot use discretion. We're going to look at the victim and offender relationship. If it's a domestic violence, every state now has mandatory domestic violence laws that require the police officers to make an arrest if there's probable cause to believe domestic violence has happened. In other words, police do not have discretion when it comes to domestic violence situations. So we're going to look at the victim and the offender relationship, the amount of evidence. Now, the standard to make an arrest is probable cause. The standard to convict somebody of a crime is much higher. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a big gap between probable cause and proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So the amount of evidence to make an arrest is a lot less than it is to convict somebody of that crime. So if it's not that major of a crime, even though the police may have probable cause, they may decide not to arrest because they know that there's not enough evidence to convict. Yes, there's enough evidence to make a proper arrest, and maybe that is prudent. But if the officer decides that it's not prudent at that moment because of other factors, the amount of evidence is going to weigh in a lot. If the officer knows that there's not enough evidence to convict the person, then maybe they decide not to make that arrest. What does the victim want to do? Outside of being in a domestic situation, because the victim really doesn't have a say if it's domestic violence. The law says the police shall arrest. But outside domestic violence, what does the victim want to do? Does the victim want the person arrested, or does the victim not want the person arrested? So they must take into consideration what the victim wants. Resources. If it's a very busy night, and when you arrest somebody, that takes time. You have to bring them to the police department. You have to book them. You have to do a police report. All that is going to take time. Does the department have the resources at that moment to take officers off the street to do the arrest report, to book the prisoner? So if it's a minor offense and it's really busy and you don't have the resources, then maybe arrest is not the best route to go at that point. Harm to the victim. How much harm was done to the victim? Now, if the victim's got a busted lip and is bleeding and bruised all over, that certainly is going to weigh heavy into the officer making that arrest. If there's no harm to the victim, no physical harm, and these other factors are leaning towards not making an arrest, then maybe the officer doesn't make the arrest. And like we said, domestic violence. Domestic violence changes everything. Every state has mandatory arrest laws for domestic violence, which throws discretion out the window. Another issue in policing is police corruption. And what is corruption? The key word there is illegal. So it's illegal activities for economic gain and accepting gratuities, favors, or payments for services that police are sworn to carry out as part of their job. So if you give me $200, I will ensure that no one parks in front of your business to ensure that you get a parking spot every day. The officer is sworn to do that job anyway, and he's doing it for economic gain. That would be police corruption. We have grass eaters, which means it's an officer who occasionally engages in illegal and unethical activities. Small favors, gifts, small bribes. And then we have meat eaters, which are the more aggressive type of corrupt officers. And they actively seek out ways to make illegal money from their position. Both are dangerous, both are infectious, but meat eaters are worse. Both are definitely unacceptable. The book talks about different forms of corruption: bribery, extortion, favoritism, perjury, shopping, Shopping is if you go to an alarm call and the business is closed and there's an open door and you must go in to secure to make sure nobody is in that business, and you go shopping. You steal a watch or steal something. That's what we call shopping. And the free meal. If you become a police officer, you're going to encounter situations where restaurants and certain businesses are going to want to give you a deal because you're a police officer. And sometimes it is genuine and they're doing it because they truly appreciate police officers and first line responders. Others do it because they want to get on the good side of police and they want to have police come to their establishment and they want to feel as though, hey, if I ever get pulled over, I'm all set because I give the police free meals at my restaurant. And as a police officer, you're going to be faced with this situation. And it's a dangerous road to go down. There was an establishment where I worked where officers, after the shift would end, they would go down to this establishment because they only charge police officers $1 for beers. And I don't drink, so I never really went. Once in a while I would go and I would have my sparkling water, but 99% of the time I did not go. Because I realized that that's just going to put me in a bad situation. And I can't tell you how many officers got in trouble from going down to that bar and drinking dollar beers. Because what do you think happens when somebody goes down and they drink dollar beers for a couple hours? They get drunk. They get in trouble. They get badge heavy, thinking they can do what they want because they're a police officer. And I just saw so many officers get jammed up because they put themselves in this dumb position because they wanted those dollar beers, that now they're about to get in a fight with somebody. Or now they're in a situation that they would not have been had they not gone down and accepted this gratuity of a dollar beer. If you are faced with a situation where you go to a restaurant, and where I worked, there were plenty of them that either charged officers half price for their meals or didn't charge them anything at all. And what I did is I would, if they charge half price or they didn't charge anything at all, I would leave whatever the amount should have been plus a tip. And that way, my mind is clear, my conscience is clear. No one bought me, especially just for a meal. My mind is clear. And whatever they want to do with the money, that's up to them. But I know when I walked out of that restaurant that I paid in full for my meal and I left a tip, even though they only wanted to charge me half price. Now, don't get in an argument with the waitress and insist on, I'm going to pay full price. Just don't even go down that route. Just leave the money. And if they want to give, the most of it to the waitress, or if they do want to take it and charge full price, that's up to them. But at least you have done your part and you have not accepted any type of bribe, because you're going to find yourself in a situation where somebody from that restaurant, the owner, the manager, the waitress, is maybe involved in an accident and maybe is a little drunk, and you report to that accident to take the accident report, and that manager of the restaurant was the driver of one of the vehicles and is intoxicated. Now you're in a very uncomfortable situation because 3 hours earlier, you just ate there for free. And now the manager who gave you a free meal is involved in an accident with the DUI. That puts the officer in a very uncomfortable position. And I guarantee you that manager is going to say out loud, so everybody can hear it, you eat for free at my restaurant, and now you're going to arrest me? So avoid all that in your career. Just avoid it. Be better. Have the clear conscience. If you are offered such a gratuity as a free meal or half price, just leave whatever the full amount would have been plus a tip. And that will avoid a lot of potential issues in your career. So now that's going to get us to what I think is probably the most interesting part of this semester. And we're going to talk about use of force, justified and excessive, because there's a lot of misinformation about use of force in police. And I will start this off by saying, yes, I was a police officer for 30 years. However, I am not an apologist for police, especially when it comes to use of force. If improper force was used, then I think police should be held responsible just like everybody else in the world. What I do take issue with are people watching a short video clip and automatically making an assumption that the police used excessive force because force was used. And what we have to understand is that there are times when police must not only use force, but must use a lot of force. And here you see the police officers, and somebody may say, well, why are there 3 or 4 officers on this one guy? That's excessive force. As we're going to learn, maybe not. And you see these officers, they have batons, they have guns. See, at least one of them has a taser. 2 of them actually have tasers, I see. At least 2 have tasers. So we have all of this equipment. And why do we have these equipment? Why do police officers have nightsticks? Is it for show? No. It's in case they need to use them. So just because police use their nightstick, we cannot automatically assume it was excessive force. We have to stop. We have to analyze. We have to look at all the facts of the situation and then make the determination of whether or not excessive or proper force was used. So just to get you in the mind of a police officer, and this is what they instruct police officers on from day one in the academy. They wean police on officer safety. Your number one job is to go home at the end of your shift. And it is a dangerous job. And you are going to be faced situations where you are going to be in danger or others are going to be in danger. Over 50,000 police officers a year are assaulted. Certainly throughout my 30 years, I was one of those every single year. An average of 135 officers are killed per year in the line of duty. The oldest person to kill an officer was 96 years old. The youngest was 7-year-old. That's a gap of about 90 years. So, and it's everything in between. So we have to erase from our mind saying that that 14-year-old posed no danger to the police officer, or that 68-year-old man posed no danger to the police officer. That's just not true. Again, there are many factors that we're going to have to look at. In the first video that we're going to watch, I want you to pay close attention. This has happened to me many times. And there's a reason why the police if they're making an arrest, they tell you to stay back. They probably don't use such nice language like that. They're probably telling you to stay the F back. Get the hell out of here. They don't want you interfering with their physical arrest, even if it's a family member, even if it's somebody who is being illegally arrested. Because as we're going to learn, you cannot resist illegal arrest either. So if the police are in a physical confrontation or physically trying to arrest somebody, stay back and do not interfere. Because if you do, then you are probably going to be subject to arrest as well. And let's see what happens in this case. As you can see right here, this is a dangerous moment for the police. Can you think why this right now is a dangerous moment for the police? There's a couple reasons. But as you can tell, if you can hear from the video, this is not a friendly crowd. And in order to effect this arrest, these officers now have their backs turned to the crowd. Very dangerous situation. And also, as we're going to learn, see how difficult it is to handcuff somebody? If somebody, and this guy's not resisting all that much, but he's resisting. Handcuffing somebody is very difficult to do, even if they're cooperative. If they're not cooperative, it's very difficult. I'm just going to rewind that. That is why police do not want you anywhere near them when they are trying to make an arrest, especially with somebody who is struggling with them. What I feared would happen, because their back was turned to the crowd, is exactly what happened. This officer here got attacked by somebody in the crowd. And this is a very real situation. And some people may say, well, I wasn't going to assault the officer. I can get close to them. I wasn't going to assault them. Well, the officer doesn't know that. The officer doesn't know who you are. So the officer is going to assume you're a danger to them. And that is a proper assumption. So when you take CRJ 258, we'll learn that, yes, you have a right to video record the police officers. However, you don't have a right to stick your camera in their face or get close to them while they're doing something like this. And why would you want to do that anyway? Why would you want to antagonize the situation and continually to get close to that officer? You can record from a distance. There's nothing the police can do about that. But you start getting closer like this guy, you're dangerously putting yourself in a position where you're going to get arrested for obstruction.
Hey, why am I seeing that? Yeah, what you talking about? gotta get me out to record this shit.
Let's take a look at our next video.
Step on back in. You have to say that, okay? You have anything in your pockets, everything like that. The lock snap on you, I'm gonna take your lock snap out. Don't put that right on your trunk, okay? Anything in here, they know that. Get the FDA out. Gary, no, hard. Oh, 1 million. That's mine. Yeah, I mean, you pay for it. That's mine.
I'm going to stop it there. You can actually hear the officer begging for his life, and the officer was killed. And this guy came out of nowhere in the car and started firing at the officers immediately. So when the police want you to show their hands, when they are shining their flashlight in the car, and yeah, maybe they shined it in your eyes, there's a reason for that. It's because police officers get shot during car stops. And again, they don't know who you are. They didn't know who this guy was. They don't know who you are. You may know you're not going to shoot the officer, but they don't know that. So that is why police can be sometimes overly cautious, because sometimes you just have a gut feeling in your stomach that something's not right here. I got chills in the back of my neck. Something in this situation is not right. So I'm going to be overly cautious. And a big part of that is because as police, you see these videos over and over, or maybe have lived it. Here's another one.
Keeping a safe distance gives you precious seconds to avoid instances like this one. The assailant has multiple warrants, and to avoid arrest, he beats the officer senseless while his daughter watches in horror.
Get in the car. Go, baby, I can't go to jail.
He did go to jail and is now serving 60 years for assaulting a police officer.
So we can see in that one, that came out of nowhere. She had him detained, and out of nowhere, he began to beat the heck out of her. And again, this is why you need to listen to the police. You know, when they tell you, put your hands behind your back or keep your hands out of your pocket, it's because they don't know. And they know and probably have been assaulted in situations very similar to that. And this next video we're going to watch. So right now in this country, we watch videos and we convict officers because of what we see in the video. And video evidence is can definitely be damning, and it can be advantageous. It can help us understand the situation, at least give us a view into the situation. But we need to do more than just watch a video. We need to learn all the facts before anybody goes out there and wants to riot against the police for using force because of a video that they saw. They need to stop, analyze, and let the facts come out. Because the chances are these days when video comes out, it's well before the full facts of the case come out. And we have due process in this country, and police are entitled to due process just like everybody else. And convicting police because of what you see on a video can be dangerous, and quite frankly, is wrong. We need to get all the information, including the video. Let's get all the facts and analyze it, the video. And that's what courts do. And that's why many times you'll see a video and you say, oh my God, that officer was definitely guilty. How could he be found not guilty in court? Because in court, they get all the evidence, they get all the facts, and they're educated on the use of force like you're going to be in a few minutes. And then they can make an informed and intelligent, educated decision on whether or not the use of force was proper. Not just looking at a 30-second video clip that doesn't show the before the video started. And really, to bring home a point, let's watch these videos. So what we saw there was, according to this video, the police shot and killed an unarmed man while he was walking away from them. And you see this and you say, whoa, wait a minute. That was excessive use of force. They killed this guy. He was walking away from him. However, there's another angle to this. So this different angle shows a different story. It shows him pointing a gun at the police, turning around, shooting at the officer, and then they shoot him, which is a perfectly justified use of lethal force. Now, had we only watched the first video, then we would have convicted these officers for killing this man. Thankfully for these officers, there was another angle. So again, if this was the only video, these officers would be in big trouble. Thankfully for them, there was another dash cam that showed the full story of the suspect pointing the gun at the officers and at one point turning and shooting at them before they even shot at him. And that is what I mean by we need to slow it down. When we see video, we cannot jump to conclusions. We need to slow it down, get all the facts. And if all the facts indicate that it was an excessive use of force, then I am all for holding the officer responsible, whatever that may be. Jail, losing their job, whatever's appropriate for the situation. So now that you have a little background, actually, before we get into that, let's talk about the fleeing felon rule, which we just saw, actually. So the old rule used to be that police could use deadly force, otherwise known as lethal force, against any person suspected of committing any felony. That means if you committed a felony and you ran from the police, they could kill you for any felony. And then along came Garner versus Tennessee. And in Garner versus Tennessee was a young boy who had just committed burglary. And the police responded to the house. He ran from the house and he jumped over the fence in the backyard. And when he jumped over the fence, the officers shot him and killed him. And under the old rule, that was a proper use of force because it was a felony and he was fleeing from the police. However, in Garner versus Tennessee, the Supreme Court said, we're going to change the rule. We're going to change it so that deadly force can only be used on a fleeing felon if, one, it's necessary to prevent escape. So they are fleeing from the police or trying to flee from the police. And this and is a big one, and the officer has probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to someone. So what happened in Garner versus Tennessee, the old rule was any felony. Now it has to be that there is a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to someone. That someone can be the officer, it could be a citizen. In Garner, fleeing from the house and jumping the fence was not under the new rule, would not qualify under the new rule as proper use of lethal force for a fleeing felon. So for exam purposes, you need to know what the fleeing felon rule is now, what the new rule is. And one more thing I want to go over is, and there was actually a recent case, a situation, it was in Philadelphia, I believe, where a man had a knife and the police had him at gunpoint and he was walking around acting crazy and actually started coming at the officers with the knife. And I heard many, many people say, why didn't they just shoot him in the leg? Why didn't they just shoot the knife out of his hand? They didn't have to shoot and kill him. And again, that's really coming from a standpoint of ignorance, of not being educated of what the police know and how the police are trained. And there's an old saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. In police work, it's the opposite. Don't bring a gun to a knife fight because knives are extremely dangerous. And I can tell you, if you're within 3 or 4 feet of me, I would much rather you have a gun pointed at me than holding a knife. I'll take that gun away from you. But taking a knife away from someone because it's sharp and bladed can be very difficult and very dangerous. And in police work, we have what's called the 21-foot rule. And this has been tried and tested many times. And what it says is that if somebody with a knife is within 21 feet, they can close in and assault you and kill you before you can get a shot off. So if the police shoot somebody who has a knife and they're posing a threat to them and they're within 21 feet, that's a justified use of force.
Here, officers have been told to investigate suspicious circumstances at night in a warehouse and react to what they find. At first glance, this officer's distance from the suspect looks safe enough. But an attacker can easily cover this distance faster than most officers can draw their guns. Remember, when you close the distance between yourself and the suspect, do so only by purposeful decision. In fact, at close distances, your only realistic option for controlling a suspect is empty hand tactics. Yet when officers are asked how they would control a knife attacker, they usually say, "I'd shoot him," forgetting that they may not have time to in reality. Here, still unrehearsed, is what really happens when officers assume they can automatically use deadly force against a knifer. They stand their ground and try to draw, or try to draw and disengage simultaneously, or even worse, try to draw, fall down, and shoot. And they lose, because time and distance work for the offender and against the officer.
You can see these officers did not have time to get their gun out. He closed in on them very quickly.
With a reactionary gap of about 1 foot or less, it's impossible for you to react quickly enough to even touch your holstered sidearm once the attack begins. At 5 feet, the average officer can't even get his sidearm unholstered. Unless your sidearm or baton is already out, you'll have to rely on physical control at 5 feet or less. At about 10 feet, you might get your sidearm out, but you probably won't get a shot off. A suspect with a knife can close 7 paces and deliver deadly force in less than 1 1/2 seconds. For the average officer to deliver 2 rounds against an attacker who starts moving at 10 feet, the sidearm must already be drawn and ready to shoot. 15 feet, your chances get a little better if you're alert, anticipate danger, and are skilled with your equipment. But to deliver 2 rounds center of mass, your hand would already have to be on your sidearm when the attack begins. Tests with hundreds of officers reveal that in most cases, a minimum reactionary gap of 21 feet is required to react and deliver at least 2 rounds and to have enough time to move out of the attacker's path.
So if you notice, he said shoot center mass, and that's what officers are trained to shoot, is at center mass, because officers shoot to stop. That's why we need to get out of our head shooting them in the leg or shooting them in the hand. First of all, for those of you who have shotguns will know that's a near impossible shot. Never mind when you're under stress, the target is moving and or you're moving as well. That's like impossible. So we need to get that out of our heads. Officers shoot to stop, and the most effective way to do that is 2 rounds center mass. That brings us to handcuffing. As I stated earlier, handcuffing somebody is one of the more difficult things that you can imagine, even if the person is cooperative. It is not an easy thing. It's an art. It's a skill that takes practice. And even with practice, it's still not an easy thing to do. You throw in there somebody who doesn't want to be handcuffed, and it's a real issue. It's a real problem. I don't care how big and strong you are and how tiny the person who you're trying to handcuff is. If that person does not want to be handcuffed, you have yourself a problem. You got a real problem on your hands. Because handcuffing somebody is not winning a fight. You're trying to control their hands and their arms by putting it behind their backs and handcuffing them. Not an easy thing to do. And this is just an example.
Get your hands off of me. You are kidnapping me. I will personally. What is your name? Take your hands off of me. You don't have the right, sir. Get your hands off me. I've done nothing wrong. I am not a criminal. Get your hands off of me. Get your hands off of me. No, that's a violation. Take your hand off of me. Sir, you need to read the Constitution. You need to read the Constitution. Get your hands off of me. You don't have the right to do this. Taking a picture, this is so illegal. Take your hands off of me, sir. I'm not a criminal. I've done nothing wrong. And I'm asking you to get your hand off of me. I'm asking you to take your hand off of me. I'm asking you to take your hand off of me. Take your hand off of me. Take I don't want your hand off. You're violating my personhood. I have my First Amendment right. Look at this. You get this? You get this? I'm asking him to take his hand off me. He has no right to kidnap me. This is kidnapping. You are. Let go of me. Let go of me. This is because the police department are ignorant of the constitutional rights. This is why this man has his hand on me, and he's on my personhood. And I have the right to protect my personhood. No, sir. Take your hand off of me. Take your hand off. Don't steal my purse. Now he's stealing my purse. I have done nothing wrong. Take a picture of these guys. Get their names. Get their names.
Can I have your badge ID, please?
Woohoo!
Can I have your badge ID?
You get all this? You see this? This is illegal.
I don't see your badge ID.
Let go of my purse. Are you filming this,
Yes,
sweetheart?
I am.
Are you filming this, sweetheart? Stop it! You cannot arrest me. I've done nothing illegal. I have done nothing illegal.
What are you being arrested for?
So here you have two pretty big, pretty strong police officers and one woman who does not want to be handcuffed. Look how difficult
After watching this video,
that
I
was
thought
for
maybe
them.
this was about a leopard.
You see how difficult that was for them? Handcuffing somebody who does not want to be handcuffed is a real problem. Causes a lot of problems for the police. And one thing we have to understand is that sometimes police need to use force. And I think part of the problem is that when police use force against somebody, it's offensive to look at. It's not pleasant watching the police, somebody of authority, using physical violence against somebody. But we need to get over that. We need to understand that, yes, it is offensive to look at, but offensive and proper are two different things. We cannot mix the two. Just because it's offensive to look at does not mean that it was improper. And I think that's where many people get confused, is they'll see a video and they'll go, oh my God, look at the force the police are using. It must be improper. And I'm not saying that it never is. Many times it is. What I'm saying is we need to evaluate, look at all the facts, and then make that determination of whether or not that force was proper, not whether it was offensive, because it was offensive. And here's a pair of handcuffs. The most dangerous time for a police officer when they're handcuffing somebody is when they have one handcuff on. And why is that? Look at this over here, an open handcuff. If one handcuff is on and that person breaks free, now what do they have? They have themselves a nice weapon. In fact, now that situation has just escalated to a lethal force situation, because look at this thing. Look at the damage this could do to somebody. Let's talk about resisting arrest. If a person is being falsely arrested, can he or she resist that arrest? And the answer to that is a flat out absolutely not. No. You cannot resist arrest, even if it's an illegal arrest. Cannot resist an arrest, even if it's an unlawful arrest. There is an avenue for redress if you're being falsely arrested, and that avenue is the courts. Think of the mayhem and the uncivilized reactions that would happen if we said, yes, you can resist arrest if you feel you're being unlawfully arrested. Whether or not an arrest is lawful is something for a court to determine. It's not for that person themselves to determine, because if that was the case, then everybody would say I was illegally arrested, so I had the right to fight back. That's how uncivilized countries operate. That's not how civilized societies operate. We leave it to the courts to decide whether or not that arrest was a false arrest or a proper arrest. But you must submit to the authority of an arrest, even if it's an illegal arrest. So when you hear people on video resisting and people in the background saying, hey, they didn't do anything, you have no right to arrest them and to try to interfere. No, that is not how we operate, and that is illegal. So let's get to what we call the use of force continuum. And when can the police officers use force? How much force can they use? And when can police use lethal force? We've already discussed the fleeing felon. So fleeing felon is different than somebody who you have under your control or you need to use lethal force. So we use what's called the use of force continuum. And every police department has this, or at least should. And what it is, it's a scale of force that police can use to arrest somebody depending on certain things. Now here is all the steps in a use of force policy, but I have scrambled them for you. And I want you to take a minute and I want you to put them in order from the least amount of force to the most amount of force. So take a minute and write down and go from the top to bottom, the top being the least amount of force and the bottom being the most amount of force, and fill in what you think how that scale should look. There will be a question like this on the midterm. So the very first step in the use of force is command presence. What the heck is command presence? Command presence is the officer being on scene, and the officer's mere presence is having an effect. And what they always tell you in the academy to have command presence, to your posture and how you handle yourself and the instructions you give and the way you talk is command presence. You're taking command of that situation just by your presence. So that's step number one. Step number two are verbal commands. Stop, police. Put your hands behind your back. Stop resisting. Verbal commands is step number two in the use of force policy. Then we have what's called empty hand controls. And that's hand techniques. It could be punching. It could be bringing someone to the ground. It's empty hand controls, meaning your hands are empty from any weapon and you're using physical strength and your hands to control that person. Next on the scale is chemical spray, which is pepper-based spray, sometimes called cap stun. I can tell you from experience, cap stun is nasty stuff. I hate it, hate it, hate it. I didn't like to use it because it doesn't discriminate. If you spray somebody with cap stun, it's in the air and everybody gets the effects of it, not just the person you spray. And I've been in many situations where other officers have used cap stun. And A, either they missed and hit me in the eye, or B, it's now in the air and we're struggling with this person who's fighting with us and we can't see or breathe ourselves because pepper spray is in the air. So personally, I'm not a fan of the pepper spray, but some officers like it. I personally don't like it. And the step up from that are impact tools and taser. So they are on the same level. Impact tools mean your nightstick, and taser we're going to go over in a minute. So they're on the same level. And then finally, lethal force. So this is the use of force scale. And one very important thing to understand is that the police do not have to go step by step by step. The police can skip steps if, it's a big if the situation calls for it. So if an officer arrives on scene, we have command presence, and the person is beating somebody with a 2x4. Does the police have to go to verbal commands? Then if that doesn't work, to empty hand controls. If that doesn't work, chemical spray. If that doesn't work, impact tools. Well, if that doesn't work, then we can shoot them. The answer to that is no, of course not, because the person's head would be bashed in if the police had to go by every step. So the police can skip steps if the situation calls for it. Another thing we must understand is that the police have the ability to meet force with greater force. Because if they don't, then it would be a tie. And that's not the object, is for it to be a tie. The police have to win the situation. So police can meet force with greater force. So if somebody is theoretically just threatening the police officer just with words, the police can go right to empty hand controls. Because what would happen if the police officer just used verbal commands? Now it's equal and it's not working. So the police have the ability to, and the authority to meet force with greater force. And let's talk about the taser just for a minute. And this is what a taser is. A taser basically is getting an electrical shock. And I've been tased before we could carry on tasers. They had to tase us. Before we could carry out pepper spray, they had to spray us with the pepper spray directly in the face. Taser, it shoots out these two prongs. You can see that they look like, let me back it up. They look like harpoons. And, you know, as you can see the sharp ends of it. And then they got these wires attached to it. And the taser shoots these out and it strikes the person and, you know, either sticks to their clothing or sticks into their body. And the taser then puts in 50 volts of electricity in that person. Not 50 watts. If it was 50 watts, they'd be dead instantly. It's 50 volts. And when I got tased in the training, it landed on my shoulder and my foot. And it felt like an electrical bat struck me in my leg. And I instantly fell to the ground. Now, if one of the probes hits the ground, it only hits the person, and the other one, only one hits the person, it's going to be ineffective. And the closer the probes are, the least effective it is. So the further out the probes are, the more powerful the jolt is going to be. In fact, we used to line up a whole row of officers, of like 15 officers, and put one probe on the person on the right, on their shoulder, and take the other probe and put it on the person all the way on the left, 14 people down, and put it on their shoulder. And they would join hands and we would activate the taser and the whole group would go down like a sack of potatoes. And they all said, every time, they all said that that jolt was more powerful than when they got tased alone, because when you get tased alone, the taser is not that far apart. The further apart the prongs are, the more effectiveness it's going to have. So these are Marines that are getting tased. What he's doing there is called a dry stun. So with the taser, if you're in close hand-to-hand combat, you can do what's called a dry stun, where you don't use the probes. You just take the taser and you put it on the person and you activate it. And it's effective, it works, but again, because it's so close, it's not as effective as if the prongs were further apart. but these dry stuns can be effective. So he's about to get shot with it. See, he can't move, and that's why they're there holding him. And he goes right down. And the cycle lasts for 5 seconds. And if the pros are still in them after the cycle, the police can reactivate the cycle again. Most of the time, we don't have to. The person's like, I don't want to feel that again. I will now become compliant. And 5 seconds is a long time.
Pull the wire off.
1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. That's a long time to feel an electrical jolt of 50,000 volts.
Throw in the sharps container. Just like.
I got like slow.
So that's the taser. And that's just a background of some of the tools that police have, why they use them, and hopefully to get you thinking, because that's how courts think. They think through the eyes of the police. And they understand the training the police go through and how they're trained. And so when a use of force situation comes up in court, they do so through the eyes of an average officer, of a reasonable officer. And now, hopefully with this training, that's how you can think as well. So we use what's called the Graham factors to see if the force was proper. We use the Graham factors, and of course we use the use of force scale. And between the two of them is how we determine whether force was proper. And the Graham factors, they're called Graham factors because it came from the case of Graham, was the name of the case. The court decided that when we need to look at whether the force the police used, we're going to look at these 3 factors. Number 1, the severity of the crime. Number 2, is the suspect a safety threat to officers or others? And number 3, are they resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by fleeing? So the court will look at these 3 factors along with the use of force scale to make that determination of whether the force used was proper. And probably severity of the crime is a big one. Certainly you're going to use different force from somebody who is being arrested for vandalism as opposed to somebody who's being arrested for a violent crime. The force used is going to be analyzed using the Graham factors and using the use of force policy. So let's take a minute here and together let's review this situation. This is from Cops.
You know, we have our little commercials that says what happens in Vegas State.
And as you watch this, listen to what the officer's saying, and then using the Graham factors and the use of force scale, whether or not you think the force the officer used was proper.
2 male fighting at one of our fast food restaurants down here.
So I cut it off. I'm just going to rewind
I
it.
just got a call here in Vegas State. And like I just got a call here, we got 2 males fighting at one of our fast food restaurants down here on the strip. Another business, White House 30 and 130, blonde hair, gray outfit. Gray outfit. So what are you fighting with? Some guy walking in the park, like brown shorts, white tie, like red hair. Okay. Yeah, he's got a problem. He's a little amped up. What's going on? What? Step to the car and take your hands out of your pockets. Take your hands out of your pockets and step up to my car. That's the second time I've asked you. You're making me nervous. Take your hands out of your pockets and step up to my car. Take your hands out of your pockets and don't resist. Now put your hands behind your back, or you're gonna get the taser. I'm trying. Put your hands behind your back.
All right. So, so he used force. Now we have to determine whether that force was proper. And I will qualify this by saying, yes, this is a video. I just went through great pains in telling you that we don't just look at the video, we look at all the facts. But we have to work with what we have. So we have this video, and now you have a background of gram factors and a use of force scale. And now you're going to apply it to determine whether or not this officer used proper force. So what's the first thing in the gram factors? And when you answer questions in your homework assignment, we'll get to it in a minute. Your homework assignment is going to be to review 4 videos that are coming up. And in each video, you're going to determine whether or not use of force was proper. And this is how you do it. You do it using the gram factors and the use of force scale. If you don't use them, you're going to get no points. Part of college education is backing your opinion up with facts. And you back your opinion up with facts using the gram factors and the use of force policy. I don't want to hear or read that I think the officer used excessive force because he didn't have to use that because I feel it was excessive. No, it has to be broken down the way we're going to break it down right now. So what did he have under the gram factors? Step number 1 is seriousness of the crime, a reason for detention. Why was this officer detaining this person? For a fight, right? So, and he fit the description of the person who was just involved in a fight. So I think, that's a violent crime. Fighting is violence. So let's put that on the table, that the seriousness of the crime was a fight. It wasn't a felony, but it was still a violent crime. So that's one fact. It was a violent crime. Threat to the officers or others. Was he a threat to the officers? Well, I think the argument can be made that yes, he was, because why? What was the officer asking him to do? He was asking him or telling him to take his hands out of his pockets. Why did he want him to do that? As we've just learned, it's dangerous when somebody has their hands in their pockets because they don't know, the police don't know what's in those pockets. So I think it's reasonable for the officer to perceive keeping your hands in your pockets when you're being detained for a fight to be a threat. And then step 3, resisting or fleeing arrest. Was he resisting? He was resisting. He was not listening to the officers. Resisting doesn't have to be just physical. Resisting can be passive resistance. And here he was not listening to the officers when the officer was instructing him 3 or 4 times, take your hands out of your pocket. So I think under the gram factors, so far, this officer is good. But now we're not done. Let's look at the force that he used. So the gram factors tell us, yes, he was authorized in using force. And the use of force scale is now going to tell us whether the force he used was proper. Because if he wasn't a threat to the officers and he wasn't resisting or fleeing arrest, then this would be excessive. There would be no reason for the officer to use force because he was being compliant. But he wasn't being compliant. He was a threat to the officers. So now we need to determine whether the force the officer used was proper. Let's go to the use of force scale. Command presence, was that working? No, it wasn't. So the officer went to hands-on techniques. He used also verbal commands. Were verbal commands working? No, they were not. So now the officer is going step by step on the use of force scale. And on its surface right now, you may say, all right, that was a proper use of force. I am going to disagree with that. And I think that this was an improper use of force. Why do I think it was improper? We just went through all these factors, the grand factors and the use of force scale, and we've determined he's done everything right. But if you take a closer look at the force that the officer used.
Step to the car and take your hands out of your pockets. Take your hands out of your pockets and step up to my car. That's the second time I've asked you. You're making me nervous. Take your hands out of your pockets and step up to my car. Take your hands out of your pockets.
All right, where does he strike him? He strikes him in the throat. I think personally, that's excessive. That's excessive. His life was not in danger. That is possibly a lethal force situation. What happens if you hit somebody in the throat that hard? You may have to perform an emergency tracheotomy right on scene. You may crush the guy's throat. So although all the grand factors were there and he followed the use of force scale, the amount of force he used was not required for that situation. If he had tackled him, I would have had no problem with that. Right, you tackled him. I think that was not excessive. Is if he tackled him, because you can use greater force. You don't have to meet equal with equal. You can use greater force, and nothing was working yet. The guy who had just been in the fight, keeping his hands in his pocket. I think the officer would have been justified in using some type of takedown on this guy, even tackling him. But going for the throat, in my opinion, I think was excessive. And I really think the officer was just showboating because it was cops. This is what it appeared to me. So if I was the attorney on this case, that's the argument I would make, is that this was excessive because it was potentially lethal force, and that lethal and the grand factors did not justify the use of lethal force. They justified the use of some force, just not the lethal force. And that's how you're going to answer the question for these next 4 videos for your homework assignment. Well, let's get to the first one. But first, a little bit about the homework assignment. Review, excuse me, the following videos, determine if police use proper force. You must back your analysis up with evidence and facts. And you do this by how we just did it, how I just did it for you, by using the grand factors and the use of force scale. If you don't use them, you're going to get a 0 on this assignment. I want you to be educated. I want you to make educated arguments, to take positions. And I don't care what position you take on any of these videos. I don't care whether you say it was proper or improper. That's not the point. The point to me is making an opinion and backing that opinion up with facts and evidence. And that's how you do it, is by using the grand factors and the use of force scale. And I've been getting a lot of one-word answers. I mean, one sentence answers from people. Unacceptable. This is college. College level I shouldn't have to explain it every time. College level requires thoughtful answers, not just one sentence or 2-word answers. And that's going to be especially true here. I don't want to read, well, because he violated the grand factors and the use of force scale. That's unacceptable. You need to explain the grand factors and the use of force for each one. So let's get to the first video. This happened in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And this officer we see standing on the left. And I'm going to start you off with an easy one, because this one is is kind of obvious, but just because it's obvious doesn't mean that you don't use the grand factors or the use of force scale. So just some of the facts. The woman that you're going to see sitting on the ground there, she was arrested for disorderly conduct at the Twin Rivers Casino in Lincoln, Rhode Island. The police were called there for disorderly behavior. She was heavily intoxicated. They arrested her for disorderly disorderly conduct. They handcuffed her and brought her outside to the parking lot and sat her down. And this is what happened next.
Surveillance video many are finding disturbing. A woman kicked in the head by a police officer. The officer's trial is continuing today. Eyewitness News reporter Sean Daly joins us live with the latest on our top local story from the Providence Mobile Newsroom.
Suspended Lincoln police officer Edward Crawlitz sat in court for a second straight day of testimony on an ugly charge that prosecutors say is backed up by video from a security camera. The suspended patrolman is accused of felony assault of a woman outside the Twin Rivers slot parlor in Lincoln back in May of '09. Prosecutors say video images from a security camera show Officer Crawlitz kicking Donna Levesque in the head after she makes a sweeping motion toward him with her leg. She was sitting on a curb in handcuffs outside Twin River after the police had escorted her out of a bar inside for what Officer Krawitz's partner characterized today as intoxicated, angry, and belligerent behavior. The two police officers were waiting for a third Lincoln police officer who would drive Donna Levesque to the Lincoln police station where she would be charged with disorderly conduct. Today, the defendant's fellow police officer at Twin River that evening testified that Officer Krawitz never expressed concern for his own safety, never said he feared serious bodily injury, never yelled out that he was in pain, and never sought medical attention. When the prosecutor asked whether Donna Levesque ever said anything as she moved her leg to try to kick Officer Krawitz, Officer Russell Enos testified that she said, quote, "Don't look in my purse." He testified that Officer Krawitz was looking for her identification in her purse. We're told.
What I find unbelievable, and again, this is an easy one. I think it's going to be obvious which side you come down on this. I'm not giving too much away. Again, you still need to use the grand factors and use a force scale to tell me why you feel that way.
Never sought
But what gets me on this is after he kicks her, he just stands there. She is lying on the ground, and he doesn't even, seem concerned at all that she's laying there. So this one is not only disturbing, but obviously improper use of force. But tell me why. Was the kick or the sweep that she did towards him, was he justified in using the force he used? Keeping in mind everything that you see on that video. He was charged, actually he was arrested, obviously he's in trial. He was charged with a felony assault, and it was a felony because he had what's called a shod foot. He had boots on, and the boot was the weapon. So therefore they charged him with the felony assault of a dangerous weapon. And he was found guilty. So this is video number 1. Video number 2. This was in Attleboro. Police responded for a domestic. This man beat up his girlfriend, and there's going to be more detail in the video. And this is North Attleboro.
Now at 5:30, the North Attleboro Police Department is under fire tonight following a violent confrontation that ended up on YouTube.
Now the video shows 4 officers using non-lethal force to subdue a man who allegedly assaulted his girlfriend.
Police say the man was confrontational, and today he faced a judge on felony charges.
Eyewitness News reporter Susan Campbell joins us now with the new details tonight.
Joseph Perry is facing a total of 14 charges, including assault with intent to kill. While prosecutors read the facts of his alleged crimes, he shook his head in disbelief. Joseph Perry facing a slew of charges in Attleboro District Court. The 22-year-old's arrest was caught on camera Sunday in North Attleboro. You can see police use pepper spray and hit Perry several times with their batons. Photos within court documents show the bruises Perry suffered. Police say Perry was taunting them the whole time.
It was estimated he was delivered
4 to 5, baton strikes by an officer. He began to laugh and taunt the officer, stating, "That's embarrassing. It took 4 cops to get me. I'm going to sue you guys." This all started because of a 911 call from Perry's ex-girlfriend. She told police Perry attacked her. As he was walking towards her, she grabbed a cup of coffee and threw it at him. He then grabbed her on the neck with his hand and stated, "I'm bigger and stronger than you. You cannot escape." Perry told police he suffers from mental health issues. According to a press release, North Attleboro police are reviewing the incident. We requested an interview with police, but we were told the police chief was out of the office and unavailable. The judge set Joseph Perry's bail at $1,000 cash. He's due back in court on October 3rd. In Attleboro with the Southeastern Massachusetts Mobile Newsroom, Susan Campbell, Eyewitness News.
Okay, so this one a little more difficult, but let's break it down. And again, I'm going to help you a little bit here. Let's break it down to what we have so far. Now, you see the police, they were using their batons. And this is one of the ones where it was offensive to look at. But we need to separate that, because just because it was offensive doesn't mean it was improper. So that's where the gram factors and the use of force scale come in. So you need to evaluate what was the crime, what was his reaction to the force the police were using. They pepper sprayed him, they were hitting him with nightsticks, didn't have any effect on him. And just a side note, where they showed his bruises, that's where police are supposed to hit you with nightsticks. They're not supposed to hit you in the head unless it's a lethal situation. So they're supposed to hit, the meaty parts of your body, your arms, your shoulders, your legs. And that's where his bruises were. Consider his size. And also, again, the crime. So you need to consider everything you saw and everything you heard on this video clip in order to determine, using the gram factors and the use of force scale, whether that was a proper use of force. Third video, the police were called for this woman destroying the store. And you'll be able to see that the front door, the glass door, is broken. And listen carefully, not only watch, but listen carefully.
Everybody get out! Get out! Drop the bar. Ma'am, drop the bar. Drop the bar. Drop the bar. I come in here and $300 to the Lay down. Turn over on your stomach. Put your hand behind your back. Do not move. You understand me? Do not move.
Okay. So I hope you watched and listened carefully, and then make your analysis using gram factors and use of force scale to determine whether that was proper. And our last video, the police stopped this vehicle for being a suspected stolen vehicle. One of the occupants ran from the police when the car stopped.
We're going back an officer up here who has some suspects stopped. They were supposedly stripping out the stolen vehicle. 416, one on the ground.
Money back now! Hey, money back now! Are you up? You hit me in the face. Move your hands now!
jail for 2 counts of aggravated assault, public servant, and also for theft.
And I just want to point something out to you.
Put it back now.
That right there, so he had on him, I believe, is the officer's baton that fell out.
Put it back now. Put it back now.
So I would also take that into consideration, what was on the ground. But again, you see how difficult it is to handcuff somebody? If they, this is 2-on-1, right? But it's not about beating somebody up. It's about getting them under control and handcuffing them. And it's not easy.
Go to jail for 2 counts of aggravated assault, public servant, and also for theft of stolen property.
And take into consideration everything you heard and everything you saw on that video. So that's it for This Is It, Chapter 7. I know it's a long one, and I apologize for that, but I think it's good material, and I think it's necessary material in this day and age that we live in, and where we're seeing accusations of police brutality. Okay, so if you have any questions, please let me know. The homework for Chapter 7 should be posted by the time you watch this video.